This movie is going to review a new document that we would like to use in a pilot for May 2014 PLC work. After we're done with the pilot, what we'd like to do is gather feedback from teachers so that we can use it for the 2014-15 school year. So what I want you to realize is that this is a document that was given to us by our state support team OIP support person, and this is just a recreation of it in Evernote. What this is really the 5-step agenda, but it's broken down in a way that an individual person would use it. So what we would like to do for May is to have every teacher complete this individual 5-step agenda for their PLC process for May. In the past, what we've always done is we have used that team agenda that everyone kind of put their information on. What we want to do for May is just have everyone complete the individual 5-step agenda. And what the recorder would do is really just take down the notes of the meeting so that we have a weekly summary of what was talked about. Then at the end of May, we'll kind of look at all of that and see how do we best combine what every teacher has done on their individual agenda so that we have some sort of team agenda completed. I don't know if that means there's going to be copying and pasting at the end of the month, or if we just write a couple summaries that point to the individual teacher documentation. We'll really have to kind of take a look at what we collect in each PLC to kind of figure out what would make the most sense. So what I want to do is just walk through this document a little bit. So obviously we need to know the month and what team you're on. What is the topic/focus of your May plan? If you want to continue to focus on your SLO, that would be appropriate. I know Adam had to have all the information by early May in order to enter the information into ETEPS, but you still have students working through the SLO process, more than likely. So if you want to continue that, that's fine. If you want to do something new for May, that's fine too. You just need to be able to explain what it is that you are doing. If it is based on a content standard, I would copy and paste it and put it here. If it is not necessarily a content standard, but it is a skill, explain it. And then can you unpack the learning target? Can you explain what it is you want students to be able to do in this part? Then do you have some sub-targets that you want to be able to say, well, here's how I know that they're doing it correctly. You would just try to explain that here. Again, I know this is a little different than last month, so really just try to do this the best that you can. So here's step 1, which is of course collect and chart your assessment data. This part of the 5-step agenda is what drives your entire process for the month. So when you see here in this column the number of students who took the assessment, if you're using your SLO, obviously you could use your pre-assessment here in this column. And then of course we're trying to break it down by subgroups. You can decide on your own subgroups. You don't have to have 2 additional. Students with disabilities is one that we really do need to focus on because of our district data. But if you have another subgroup you'd like to focus on, go ahead and add it here. If you have a 3rd subgroup you'd like to focus on, go ahead and add it. But what we really want to see is students with disabilities and 1 additional subgroup. Usually economically disadvantaged students also tend to show up on our district reports. So again, you're just explaining the number of students who completed it. For these columns, proficient, near proficient, well below proficient, you could go back to your SLO template or your SLO plan and use the words that you put in the plan in these columns. It is okay to rename these columns to better support your SLO. If you're not using your SLO, somehow or another you need to explain, what does this mean? What do you determine proficient? If you're just using the TDA 80%, that's fine. Then you could just put in parentheses that you're looking at how many students scored 80% or above. Near proficient, what is that? Is that 70 to 79? Just give some detail about what that means, and then how many students do you have. Then what you need to do is analyze the data from whatever assessment, pre-assessment, whatever you're doing for step 1. What did they do well? What did they not do well? And then just explain them here. Actually provide a narrative that shows your analyzation of the data you've collected. Step 3, again, you can rename these columns. You could even add another column if you wanted to. But this is, of course, where you are explaining the learning outcomes that you have for what it is that you're doing for the month. Then for your instructional groups, again, go back to your SLO. How did you decide on your tiers? These could actually just be your tiers. Again, rename the columns as you need to. Just make sure that you explain at some point, somewhere, what that means. Step 4 will be, what will the teacher provide in their instruction? How you're going to implement it, how long will you implement it? Obviously we're only doing this for May, so kind of keep that in mind. We are not doing PLCs in June, so this is really just for May. And then there's one text box here. You can add more if you want. You know, like maybe you would want one text box for a description of what you're doing, then you'd want another text box for what you would see from students once it's implemented. And if you could explain how would someone know that you were implementing it with fidelity? If somebody walked in to whatever teaching situation you were doing, how would they know that you're meeting your own goals? Because that's really what this is about, is how could somebody know that you're implementing it the way you had planned it? And then, of course, step 5 is just collecting, charting, and analyzing your post-test data. So your columns here can, of course, reference your columns up here that you were doing for the pre-assessment and the planning. Then, this is new. Submit lesson plans and student work samples to illustrate your process. So if you have a 6-page document where you've collected your pre-data, it's long, but we really do need to start looking at what type of data are you using. And since we're using Evernote, you can always export that into some sort of PDF and just kind of attach it to your actual 5-step agenda. And then, do you have any thoughts, reflections, or ideas about the process? You could also talk about whether or not you feel that the form components make sense for what we do. So I just added the word form there. So really think about how we could better revise this form to support what we do. Now again, going into next year, if you're going to use your SLO, this is all of that SLO plan information that you create. So you would be in charge of making these columns support your SLO plan. So feel free to do that in May, and then we will come together and we will talk about how that worked for you.